The entire class burst into loud laughter when Mr. Anderson, the notoriously arrogant advanced math teacher, mockingly handed the chalk to Mary Jackson, the older black janitor. In their eyes, Mary was simply a janitor, a quiet, humble woman whose calloused hands bore the marks of decades spent cleaning hallways and collecting trash. When Mr. Anderson, with a sneer, challenged her to solve the notoriously difficult math problem that loomed on the blackboard, no one expected anything more than for her to lower her head in shame and quietly walk away. However, what happened next left everyone speechless. As laughter abruptly ceased, replaced by utter astonishment, Mary not only walked to the board, but confidently took the chalk, shattering every prejudice and expectation in that room, revealing an extraordinary mathematical talent no one could have imagined. Jefferson High School, located in the suburbs, was renowned for its high educational standards and the wealth of the white families who lived in the area. However, behind its modern, civilized facade lay a darker core where prejudice simmered beneath the surface, and Mary Jackson was a victim of that cruel bias. Mary was an older black woman, her hair curly and streaked with gray, her eyes filled with sorrow yet always radiating resilience. For nearly 20 years, Mary had worked as a janitor at Jefferson, a quiet, simple job that easily made her a target for racist gazes. Every day, Mary arrived while it was still dark. She swept the long empty hallways, cleaned each classroom, and scrubbed every corner of the stairs. Though diligent and dedicated, to many she was still just an old black woman doing menial work. Students often walked past her with indifferent, cold stares, sometimes even sneering behind her back. Teachers, though not openly insulting, looked at her with suspicion and avoidance, never offering a kind word. On quiet afternoons, Mary would sometimes stand by the classroom window reflecting on her life, her youth, her dream of becoming a renowned mathematician. But harsh realities, a poor family background, and societal prejudice forced her to abandon that bright academic path. Mary learned to live in silence, enduring scrutinizing eyes and subtle insults daily like an unchangeable fate. But what she didn't know was that life still held unexpected surprises, and a significant event was about to place her at the center of a pivotal turning point. That morning, after finishing her work cleaning the hallways, Mary quietly entered Mr. Mark Anderson's advanced math class to wipe away chalk dust from the floor. She always tried to work quickly and quietly, but her very effort made her an easy target for contemptuous glances and cruel jokes. Mark Anderson was the renowned math teacher at Jefferson, famous not only for his deep knowledge, but also for his handsome, polished appearance. However, his intelligence and reputation had fostered excessive pride, and he maintained a cold, unwelcoming attitude toward people of color. When Mary bent down to pick up crumpled paper by his feet, Anderson suddenly smirked, a malicious idea flashing through his mind. "Mary," he called loudly, breaking the classroom silence, his cold eyes fixed on her. "I'm sure you've been eavesdropping on my lessons. Why don't you show the class your secret math skills?" The entire class turned to look at Mary and erupted in snickers. The atmosphere became suffocating, with careless laughter blending with subtle mockery of her skin color, age, and job. A few students whispered just loudly enough for Mary to hear their malicious words. "She probably doesn't even know what the problem on the board is." Mary stood frozen, her hands gripping the paper tightly, her heart aching. Her eyes met Anderson's, silently hoping for sympathy, or at least an apology for the cruel joke, but all she received was a look of enjoyment and challenge. "Don't be embarrassed, Mrs. Mary," Anderson continued, raising his voice deliberately. "This problem is pretty tough. Even my best students have given up on it. But who knows, maybe you're an undiscovered genius. Come up here and show us." The tension grew thicker as all eyes fixated on Mary, eagerly anticipating her failure. With all the pride she had left, Mary took a deep breath and walked toward the board. She didn't know what awaited her, but for the first time after years of enduring degradation, she was determined not to back down. As Mary approached the blackboard, Anderson remained with arms crossed, a self-satisfied expression on his cold face, fully confident that Mary would soon regret this challenge. But what he didn't realize was that he himself was about to learn the most profound lesson of his life. In that moment, Mary's mind suddenly returned to another time, a buried memory she had locked away for more than 30 years. Back then, Mary was one of the few outstanding black students in the mathematics department at prestigious Columbia University. Her exceptional intelligence made her a standout, but also the target of envy, contempt, and racial discrimination from wealthy white students who believed someone like her didn't belong in such a renowned institution. Mary never forgot finding cruel messages on her dorm door. "Go back to where you belong," or "You don't belong at Columbia." She never forgot being isolated by classmates, ignored during group discussions, or looked down upon by professors when she asked questions. Though painful, Mary endured because she carried the hopes of her entire family, her parents who had worked tirelessly so their daughter could have a proper education. However, life proved harsher than expected. When her father suffered a serious accident, her struggling family was pushed into even greater financial hardship. The weight of pressure fell heavily on the young student's shoulders, forcing her to make the most heart-wrenching decision, giving up her dream of becoming a mathematician. The day she left Columbia, Mary stood for a long time at the school's gate, tears streaming down her face. She promised herself she would return to her passion, but life wasn't so simple. Time passed quickly, and the burdens of daily life submerged all her hopes. Mary accepted manual labor jobs, hiding her extraordinary mathematical talent like a secret that would never be revealed. 30 years passed in silence and endurance. Mary thought she had become accustomed to prejudice and mockery. But now, standing before the blackboard in Anderson's classroom, all the old wounds throbbed painfully. That memory burned through her soul, making her ask herself, why does life always force us to step back? But just when Mary felt she might collapse again under the weight of prejudice, something powerful within her awakened, a resolve stronger than ever before. Today, she would not stay silent or endure more humiliation. It was time for Mary Jackson to prove to everyone that she deserved respect, not just because of her skin color or job, but because of her intellect and dignity. The air in the classroom froze as Mary picked up the white chalk. The whispers and chuckles fell silent, replaced by curiosity mixed with doubt. Could this janitor who had quietly spent years cleaning possibly do anything with the daunting problem on the board? In that breathless moment, Mary raised her hand to the board. The chalk made a sharp, decisive sound as it hit the surface, a sound like a bell signaling that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same. The complex mathematical symbols suddenly became clear to her, and every logical thought she had buried deep for 3 decades began to awaken miraculously. Behind Mary, Anderson's self-satisfied smile began to fade. The mocking look on his face slowly gave way to confusion and doubt. He had never thought the woman he had always looked down on would dare to challenge him with such confident defiance. Mary wrote as if she had never been away from these equations. Every number, every calculation was shockingly precise, as if her mathematical ability had never been dulled by time or prejudice. The more precisely Mary wrote, the greater the tension grew in the classroom. Students' curiosity turned to astonishment, then to awe. When the chalk finally stopped, the entire room fell into absolute silence. Mary slowly set the chalk down, turned, and looked directly into Anderson's eyes, whose arrogance had vanished, and gently but firmly said, "This is the answer you were looking for." Mary gently turned back to the blackboard. She knew words alone weren't enough to change deep-seated prejudice. She needed to prove her capabilities. The chalk in Mary's hand moved again, stronger and more decisively than ever before. She moved without hesitation, her hand flowing as if complex formulas were a natural part of herself. Every stroke radiated a sharp logic and intelligence that was so astonishing no one could look away. The students who had once mocked Mary now sat frozen, their eyes wide open, expressions shifting from disbelief to unmistakable admiration. Even the top students who prided themselves on their mathematical abilities had not solved the problem that Mary was solving with ease. In the corner, Anderson stood frozen, his eyes glued to every stroke. The smugness that had defined him evaporated quickly, leaving behind a pale face filled with embarrassment. The sharp mathematical lines on the board seemed like small cuts piercing deeply into the pride he had built upon prejudice. When the final chalk mark was made, Mary stepped back. The answer was clear, clean, and flawlessly accurate. No one could find a single mistake in her brilliant solution. The classroom remained silent for seconds before soft murmurs began to appear. Not mocking laughter or cruel words, but genuine astonishment mixed with admiration. "No way! She really did it! It's unbelievable!" Mrs. Mary solved the problem that even we gave up on. Anderson still didn't speak, standing frozen with eyes fixed on the blackboard, his face showing only confusion, disappointment, and profound shame. Mary gently placed the chalk down and turned to face the class once more. For the first time in many years, she felt pride and relief fill her heart. In her unwavering gaze, it was clear to everyone. Mary Jackson was no longer the submissive woman living in silence. She had broken the invisible chains of prejudice, standing strong with her intellect and courage. Soon after, the quiet murmurs turned into uncontrollable chatter. The students who had once mocked Mary now seemed unable to believe what they had witnessed. The looks once full of prejudice and cruelty had completely changed. No longer sneers or mockery, but respect, astonishment, and shame. "We were wrong. She really is a genius," one boy quietly admitted. Many students glanced at Mary, embarrassed for having judged someone based on appearance, profession, and skin color. Anderson stood frozen, unable to speak. He had never experienced the feeling of being defeated before his entire class. His pale face, usually marked by arrogance, now showed only embarrassment and bitterness. Mary stood silently before the blackboard, observing the changes unfolding. She didn't say anything or smile, but deep within her heart was a powerful sense of pride, joy she hadn't felt for 3 decades. As she watched the young faces change, Mary understood she had broken down the invisible wall that had kept her separated from others, forcing those who had once looked down on her to look at themselves with sincere remorse. The classroom was filled with an entirely new atmosphere. The most important lesson today wasn't on that blackboard. It was the lesson of respect, of judging others not by appearance, occupation, or skin color. And the person teaching this profound lesson was none other than the humble older woman they had once scorned. When the bell rang, Mary quietly left and returned to her work. The hallway was bustling with activity, but today no one looked at her with mockery. Instead, Mary encountered cautious, apologetic, even respectful glances. Later that afternoon, as Mary gathered her cleaning tools in the janitor's closet, a knock on the door broke the silence. It was Anderson, his eyes no longer smug or cold, but filled with hesitation and deep shame. "Mary, can I talk to you?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with unfamiliar shyness. Mary nodded gently and allowed him to enter the small room, which smelled of floor cleaner and bleach. "Mary," Anderson hesitated, calling her name for the first time with genuine respect. "I want to apologize for what happened this morning. I behaved disrespectfully, and I deeply regret it." Mary looked at him for a long moment, her gaze gentle but serious. "Mr. Anderson, what you did today is not the first time I've experienced this. I've lived nearly my whole life in disdain and prejudice simply because of my skin color. But this time it hurt more because it happened here, in a place I've worked for so long, where I thought I would receive some respect." Mary's voice trembled slightly, but she remained calm. "Since I was a student, I had to give up my dream of becoming a mathematician because of cruel prejudices. I had to hide my intellect, accepting menial labor just to live in peace away from scrutinizing eyes. Can you imagine living in silence for decades just to avoid further pain?" Anderson remained silent, his head bowed. Each word from Mary felt like sharp needles piercing his heart. He realized that he, who always prided himself on his intellect, had made the most serious mistake a teacher could make, looking down on someone based on appearance and skin color. "I'm truly sorry," Anderson repeated, his voice now more sincere than ever. "I was wrong. I had no right to look down on you or anyone like that. Today you taught me a lesson I'll probably never forget." Mary smiled gently. "I don't need your apology for myself, but I hope that after today you'll remember that a person's worth is not determined by their skin color, job, or status, but by their character, intelligence, and how they treat others." Anderson looked up at Mary, his eyes now reflecting genuine respect mixed with admiration. He nodded firmly, as if making a silent promise never to repeat this mistake. Within less than a day, the story of the elderly janitor who had defeated prejudice and solved the most difficult math problem in the advanced math class spread throughout the school like an unstoppable wave. The once invisible woman had suddenly become the central figure spoken of with respect and curiosity. Students who had once ignored her now looked at her with admiration and greeted her respectfully. However, Mary remained unchanged. She continued to live simply and humbly, still focused on wiping down every desk, cleaning every window, and sweeping every hallway as though nothing had occurred. Her calm demeanor and humility only deepened others' admiration for her. For Anderson, this story became a great mental shock, forcing him to confront his deepest prejudices. He spoke less, and whenever he encountered Mary, he would lower his head and greet her quietly, his eyes reflecting regret and respect. Within a week, Mary had become a living legend at Jefferson School, a symbol of resilience, courage, and the ability to overcome bias. Her story was retold endlessly, and other teachers began to realize their own mistakes, slowly changing their perceptions of her and, more broadly, how they treated everyone around them. Mary's story reached Principal Robert Williams, causing him to reflect deeply. One late afternoon, he personally went to find Mary in her small storage room. "Mrs. Jackson, I've heard about what happened in Mr. Anderson's class, and I'm ashamed. I realized our school still has issues with underlying prejudice that I should have noticed sooner," Williams said sincerely. "I'd like to offer you a position on the math teaching staff. Having you in the teaching team will help change perceptions, not only because of your extraordinary math skills, but also as a living example of a person's true worth beyond their job or skin color." Mary was deeply moved, her dreams from younger years resurfacing vividly. But she smiled gently, responding with calm certainty. "Mr. Williams, I appreciate your offer. In my youth, I dreamed of standing before a classroom, but now I realize my value doesn't depend on the job I do or position I hold. I don't need a title for others to recognize my worth. What I truly hope is that my story will help others understand that everyone deserves respect and fairness, regardless of who they are, what job they have, or their skin color. Williams nodded respectfully, realizing he had just learned an important lesson in humility and true courage. After this conversation, although Mary continued her janitorial work, the atmosphere at Jefferson School began to change noticeably. Stories about Mary spread like seeds, sprouting in each person's heart. In classrooms, teachers no longer hesitated to discuss issues of racism and prejudice. Lively discussions were organized where students shared honest thoughts about their experiences. In these discussions, Mary Jackson was always mentioned with respect and gratitude. Though humble and never actively involved in public debates, she had unknowingly become a powerful symbol of the fight against racism. Anderson, once her greatest detractor, was now among the most active teachers promoting anti-racism programs, openly sharing his mistake and admitting it was Mary who helped him realize the true value of respect and equality. Mary lived quietly and simply, but whenever she appeared in hallways, the once cold or mocking eyes had completely changed to sincere respect and friendly smiles. She understood these changes weren't because of her, but because of the greater values she had unknowingly awakened in everyone's hearts. Mary's story spread beyond Jefferson's walls to parents and the community. Principal Williams approached her again with a request to speak at a major event about racism and social equality. Though hesitant at first, Mary agreed, not to be the center of attention, but because she believed her story could help others see themselves more clearly. The day of the event arrived and the auditorium was packed. As Mary walked onto the stage, her heart pounded, but the attentive eyes made her feel stronger. "I am Mary Jackson," she began simply but powerfully. "Many know me only as a janitor, but I once dreamed of becoming a mathematician at Columbia University. But that was a time when a black woman's dream was not easily realized." Mary recounted the discrimination she had faced, not attempting to make her story more tragic, but her sincerity caused the auditorium to fall into complete silence. "For 30 years, I lived quietly, hiding my talents because I believed the world would never accept me because of my skin color or job. But I was wrong." Mary's voice rang with conviction. "A person's worth is never determined by skin color, job, or status. What truly matters is dignity, self-respect, and how we treat one another." "I stand here not seeking pity," Mary asserted calmly, "but to remind you that each of us deserves respect. Fairness should not be a privilege. It must be a fundamental right for all. Only when we stop judging each other based on appearances will we truly find mutual respect." The auditorium remained silent after her words, an atmosphere of deep emotion filling the room. Silent tears fell on many faces, for Mary had conveyed a powerful message about the true value of each person. The next day, Mary returned to her simple work, but everything seemed lighter. Students who passed no longer turned away but greeted her politely. What Mary realized most wasn't the external respect, but the change within her own soul. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw a resigned woman, but a strong, confident woman worthy of respect. Anderson now greeted Mary with respectful nods, his attitude sincere and filled with deep respect. In quiet moments alone, Mary would often smile softly, a smile of serenity, contentment, and quiet joy that no fame could bring. She knew the true value of herself no longer needed external confirmation. From that day forward, Mary continued her janitorial work, but she was no longer confined by her job, skin color, or others' prejudices. She had become completely free. Free because she had found peace within herself, content with her life, and most importantly, because she had discovered her own worth and self-respect. Jefferson School had changed forever. No longer holding silent prejudices, it was now filled with inclusiveness, equality, and mutual respect. Mary Jackson's story became a powerful symbol of inner strength, self-respect, and courage to overcome unjust prejudices. A reminder that a person's value should never be limited by skin color, status, or occupation. Mary didn't care about external fame. What mattered to her were the changes she helped bring about for younger generations. Students growing with new awareness, no longer influenced by wrong prejudices passed down by previous generations. Mary Jackson, the elderly black janitor, had become an immortal symbol, not because of anything grand, but because of her sincerity, humility, and extraordinary inner strength that broke through invisible barriers of prejudice. Her image would always remind people of the right to live with respect, equality, and love, the most noble values every person deserves.